Hi Long Range Hunting, welcome to another Long Range Hunter Reacts video. Welcome back everybody. We're doing another React video. I'm Jared from Long Range Hunting Group, and today I'm going to be looking at a couple of videos. Now this is an important topic. It's something I preach all the time, and that has to do with smaller cartridges being used for big game hunting, especially at long range. Alright, we're starting out with Cassandra Cow Elk at 688 yards by Grable Precision. And this is with a 243 Winchester with a 105 BLD, which is from Berger. So let's dive in. Now you can hear them kind of talking. That's dialogue between the shooter and spotter. Something really important right here, and I'm going to use my cursor to show you what I'm talking about, is right here. Now they're talking about we're waiting for that one to move so they can get the other one. So they have the animal they want to get picked out, and they're simply waiting for a clear shot. This is something a lot of people don't realize, that it doesn't matter short or long range, we're always trying to get the best shot we can, and if we can't get it, we simply don't take it. There's no difference between long range and short range in that.
See how it's open right now? Yeah. Do that. Now hold right in the middle. Just go really slow on the trigger and stare right at that elk. You'll focus on that elk. Okay, right behind the shoulder now. Good first elk.
Now, what did you just see? You saw an elk. This is a cow elk. Seems to be a pretty good sized one. And one shot from that 243 at almost 700 yards dropped it on the spot. Now, a lot of people will say this is lucky. That's not actually true. What a lot of people don't realize is luck plays no factor in it. Now, can somebody who's not a great shot get lucky with a shot? Yes. But when we're talking about the terminal ballistic side of it, with that bullet based on construction, the terminal ballistics is what happens when that bullet enters, the kind of damage it causes, the energy transfer, etc. And there's really no luck involved. Either the bullet's going to perform or it's not. The only time there is what I would call luck is when a bullet fails, but you get lucky. Something like that is, I have a buddy that not too long ago had a bullet fail. He was using a Barnes triple shock on an elk. It failed to expand. It ended up changing directions, and he got lucky that it ended up hitting its hip and severing the artery. Now, the reason he got lucky in that is the fact that if it had exited prior, it wouldn't have got that blood loss. And so the fact that its hip was damaged and it was losing so much blood, he was able to put a couple more rounds to it and put that animal down. And that was done at short range, high velocity with a Magnum. And so that's really the only time you're getting lucky, but there's no luck. Either the bullet's going to perform or it's not. And a lot of people drastically overestimate what it takes to kill an elk. They're not as tough or built as people believe. If you want to look at it, a white-tailed deer is one I always hear a comparison. People bring weight into it. This is a 200-pound deer, but it'll work for that, but it won't work for an elk. At 800 pounds, well, guess what? Weight's irrelevant. You're not shooting 800 pounds, you're shooting a section. And the depth of penetration is what really matters with that. Now, let's look at the differences between those. A white-tailed deer has a depth to vitals, that's from the initial hit until it hits the vitals, of 3 inches. An elk has 4 inches, so only a difference of 1 inch. Now, the depth of vitals, and that's the depth from when you hit the vitals to the opposite side, is 10 inches for a white-tailed deer, and it's 15 inches for an elk. So we're only looking at a difference of 5 inches there. So in total, we're looking at a difference of 6 inches. That's it. The depth of penetration difference between elk and the white-tailed deer is only 6 inches, and that's all that matters. And what you got to realize too, once you get inside that chest cavity, there's a lot of what I call dead space. You got to remember that you're really only getting that first few inches of resistance, and then once you're inside, let's talk about the lungs. Those lungs fill most of that void. So inside the lungs is air. So you have all that dead space. The lungs really don't offer a lot of resistance either. And so once you get inside that chest cavity, that lung is going to fill the void. You have those 2 lungs. So you have 4 walls total. And honestly, it really doesn't take a whole lot to destroy that. And so once you get past that initial 3 or 4 inches, you're not meeting a lot of resistance to slow that projectile down. So it really, 6 inches difference isn't going to make a whole lot of difference. If you want to even look at the shoulders, because people think that the bones are drastically different, that, you know, it's almost like a dinosaur when you get to an elk. That's not actually true. The difference between an elk shoulder thickness, where you're going to shoot it for a high shoulder shot, and a white-tailed deer, we're only talking 1/10 of an inch, and these are actual shoulders. Now, are elk taller? Yes. Are they longer? Yes. But that's irrelevant. You know, are the bones longer? Yes. Are they wider? Yes. But again, that's irrelevant. Even if you look at, if you're talking about an elk and a deer, the ribs, there's not a lot. It's just like when you're dealing with the shoulder bones, it's very minute, about 1/10 of an inch difference in thickness of the projectile going through. Now, ribs are something that a lot of people don't understand. It's not cartoonish round. They're actually kind of wide. They're almost like a blade. And so the elk's going to be a little wider, a tiny bit thicker, and longer. But as far as the depth of penetration, that's all that matters with ballistics. They're really not that different. So we're looking very, very minute differences between an elk and a white-tailed deer. They're not armored. A lot of where that comes from is bad bullet choice. I hear guys all the time, elk are tough, they'll soak up bullets. No, what's happening is you're using a poor bullet, you're overestimating the amount of resistance needed, and that bullet's not meeting that resistance, so it's just simply penciling through and not dumping a lot of energy. Energy is only a potential.
That's so exciting.
You just knocked it right to the ground.
I'm zoomed back out.
Now, real quick, you can see they have a nice stable position. She is nice and prone. She looks to be in a good position for that shot. They were able to view it. This is very, very common in this type of terrain. You can see there's really nothing as far as cover and concealment. There are some terrain features that you can use to try to get a little bit closer, but something a lot of people don't realize with elk is elk have excellent long-range vision. And so what elk will actually do, because there's a bunch of them, you'll see when you look at those elk, they're facing in all different directions. It's a security measure they do to spot predators from a long way. And so you're not trying to defeat one animal, you're trying to defeat all of them, and they have a perimeter basically. But you know, she's got a good stable position. It looks like a good rifle setup. You know, everything worked out. She made a really good shot, dropped dead on the spot.
Well, Cassandra killed her first elk there. That was 680 yards with a 243. Very well done. That's actually a spot where we can drag it downhill.
Yep.
That was by far the best elk to get. It won't go on safe now. That's already.
All right, so I'm going to cut this short because the rest really doesn't show anything that's needed. But honestly, the 243 is going to do a number on it. People really get almost kind of a mind game when it comes to this. And let's take a second before we get to the next video and kind of break this down. Now, I just had a conversation with a guy when I was talking about this video, and he said, why do you feel the need to do this? And another guy popped on and said, hey, you know what? It's because of guys like me, guys that know better, but it still messes with me. And this is very true. People have almost been brainwashed because they've heard it so much. You need a certain cartridge for a certain animal. This comes from magazine articles, it comes from guides, and it's drastically incorrect. The cartridge is just a vessel for velocity. That's all it does. You know, every 30 caliber takes the same projectiles. The only difference is the velocity. And so it really doesn't matter what cartridge you use. It matters on that bullet's construction, design, the impact velocity, its effective range, its minimum impact velocity, etc. And so you don't need something massive. You know, this comes a lot from guides because people don't realize the recommendation that they give for Western hunting when somebody says, hey, what gun should I bring? They say, bring a 300 Win Mag. This has nothing to do with that is what's required. It has to do with clients they have come out that can't shoot. They miss animals, they wound animals, and then they try to blame the guides. So the guides want something large enough to try to mitigate that and try to minimize the amount of wounded animals and misses they get. Unfortunately, this does nothing because if they're using a bad bullet, and this is something I hear all the time, guys will say, oh, well, you know, elk are super tough. They're super, super tough. And, you know, I've shot them and it just, you know, it absorbs it. Well, that's a bad bullet. It's not expanding. And so people don't realize, and I did a video on this just to do a really good example of that bullet, even if smaller one, if it has better terminal ballistics, if it performs better, can actually outperform a larger cartridge. So I did an example. I used this 6mm Creedmoor, which is a 6mm just like the 243. This runs the same type of bullets. I used a 223 with a 69 grain tipped Match King. This I used the 8 tips, 110, and then I went against the 50 BMG.
Okey-dokey.
Go take a look at this. Oh. Whew. That'll clear your sinuses. Whew. Scramble your brain. Ah. Dust everywhere.
Slow motion. And here we go. See, it blew straight through. No real dump of energy.
All right, let's go take a look.
Get clear. I broke a hole in the bucket, sunk in. Yeah, with both of them.
Oh man, it really started opening up right there. Yeah, it broke the bucket. And then it broke the second bucket. So it really, ooh, man, it really started. Well, there goes another bucket. That's it right there, it looks like. So you can see right in there, you see that violent opening up. Looks like the bullet actually possibly exited, or is that a piece? No, that's a piece right there. Now we hit this at almost 3,000 feet per second. Very, very high velocity. A lot of transition of energy for such a small cartridge. You can see that's a nice start of a cavity right there. Be interesting to show the footage. There's the tip. Now, what did we see? We saw the 223 and the 6 Creedmoor had a larger energy transfer and a larger permanent wound cavity. Now, these were all shot at the exact same distance and close to same velocities. The difference is the smaller bullets opened up more and caused more trauma. They caused that displacement. That's what you need. When that bullet hits, that bullet needs to open up. Now, the 50 BMG, because of the harder construction, did not meet the necessary requirements to do that. Now, a lot of people don't realize this is when you get .338 and up, the bullets are actually constructed much differently. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm not sure why they do this. I don't know if it's just because the force is behind it, it's larger, what the case is. But let's take the ELD match, for instance. The 22 through 30 calibers are all built the same. They have the same jackets, design, everything. When you get into .338s, however, that bullet is actually an ELD-X or an SST in effect, because it has the thicker jacket, it has a lock ring in there, and so it's tapered, and so it's completely designed differently than the normal ELD match. And so not only do you have a thicker construction, which is going to increase the minimum impact velocity and limit the performance, especially at those longer ranges, but also because of the bullet weight, you have such a high sectional density that it's actually going to need much more force in order to open up. And so it's going to drastically limit you on the long range game. And so going with larger, when you get into .338s and above, is not actually going to help you. If you're talking ELR like competition, that's a different story, but terminal ballistics aren't a factor in that. So you can actually utilize a smaller 30 caliber Magnum and outperform at long range a .338. So it's one of those things that you got to understand the bullet is what dictates everything, and especially when it comes to terminal ballistics. And so you don't need a massive one. I mean, you can see with a 223, I was able to defeat a 50 BMG. Now, this I'm going to show you real quick is actually a video by Jerry Michalik, and he did the same test in gel around the same distance, and you can see that it blows straight through that block, doing the exact same thing that I experienced.
Here we go on the line. Here we go. Yeah, all right, here we go. Oh! Whoa! Clear. Flag in. Woo! Let's go take a look, see what we did. I know from under a shed like this, that compensator really clear your sinuses out. We went right through the block. Didn't seem to do a whole lot. Let's go take a look. Hey guys, 50 BMG, keeps going in a straight line. 16-inch of gelatin, it didn't even veer, didn't do anything, but made a straight B line to the rear. So, that calls for another block. We're gonna have to get another block and see if we can make that AMAX start to tumble or open up or whatever. We just want to see how much test medium it takes to make that round start coming apart.
Now, this is kind of mind-boggling. It's going to go against what you've been taught for a long time, and I know it's kind of hard. You get basically what's called backfire effect, and you can pause and read this real quick, but effectively, when something's been drilled into your mind and you have that strong belief, when somebody contradicts that, especially the stronger that belief is, when they debunk it or contradict it, people get defensive and they'll even double down and won't believe it, because that means having to admit that they were wrong and changing their minds. But quite frankly, there's a lot of BS out there, a lot of misinformation, and most of it, especially with these cartridges for certain animals, the whole reason they're doing that is geared to try to prevent wounded animals because of people who can't shoot. Contrary to what, you know, all these people tell you, every hunter is the best shot in the world. Very few people are going to admit when they're bad. And I've seen some really terrible shots. So it's one of those things that it comes down to just a lot of bad information. You do not need a large cartridge to take down big animals. That bullet's construction and shot placement is what's going to do it. And I talk about shot forgiveness a lot of times. Here's the thing. That 223 or this 6mm, because of the hydraulic shock it achieved, the temporary wound cavity, the permanent wound cavity, is going to give you more shot placement forgiveness than that 50 BMG. So going larger isn't necessarily better. You can see though, at almost 700 yards, she dropped it. and I hear all the time, the luck, and something people that don't like long range like to do is try to throw dirt on stuff with hypotheticals. Oh, well, she really shot it, 8 times and you didn't see it. And there's a ton of other ones like, well, you didn't see all the ones you missed prior, all the wounded animals, you got lucky. They have all these excuses because end of the day, this is video evidence showing that they are wrong. So you really don't need it. But let's dive into the second video real quick, and then we'll go on with some more examples showing you how effective these are. Now let's look at this one. This is a 243. Same thing. I'm not sure on the bullet, but this is a trophy bison. Now, a lot of people don't realize bison actually have one of the largest bone structures and bone to meat ratio. A lot of animals, you're going to get about 30% of its body weight in meat. With a bison, you're getting more like 15 to 20. There's a lot of bone. And so the fact that a 243 can go through all that, well, you can just watch. So we have a healthy bison. There's no bullet holes. There's nothing. It is just sitting there perfectly unwounded. There's no blood around it. Now, what did you just see there? Perfectly fine animal. There's no holes. There's no blood. There's no nothing. One single shot with a 243, lights out, birthday canceled, dirt nap. Just plain and simple. Now, I know another thing people are going to say is, oh, well, when you're dealing with a smaller bullet, you're not going to get the same kind of wind, and you need a magnum for that in order to buck those winds at long range. No, you don't. Let's actually look at some numbers, because people talk about how flat shooting something is, flight times, etc. So I'm comparing this 6 Creedmoor running a 110A tip and comparing that to my 300 Win Mag running a 208 grain ELD match. Now, let's look at some numbers. At 1200 yards, which is further than most people are going to shoot, period. Now, the minimum impact velocity on this is low enough that I can hunt at 1200 yards with this. That bullet will open up and cause very, very good trauma and be fatal with the 6 Creedmoor or the 300 Win Mag. Now, this actually outshoots it on trajectory. Now, what do you mean? Let's look at true data. That means I've actually verified it. I know the data is good. This, at 1200 yards, is 9.4 mils of drop. Now, my 300 Win Mag is 10.2 mils. So, 9.4 is flatter than the 10.2. So this actually at 1200 yards beats my 300 Win Mag, not only in flight time, but also in trajectory. Now, let's talk about the wind, because people think that smaller bullet is just going to get blown around. There's only 0.2 of a mil difference between these two. One is 0.7 of a mil for a 5 mile an hour wind, that's full value at 1200 yards, and one is 0.9. So 0.7, 0.9, that equates to 8.6 inches of difference between the two at 1200 yards. Again, that's a long ways away. Most people are not even going to be shooting that far at an animal. So, you're not losing anything. This is still, even with that smaller bullet, and you got to remember too that this is a heavy for caliber bullet. When you're talking about, lighter bullets, let's say you take the 6mm and you go light, you go with a really light varmint type bullet. Now that is going to get blown around because it has a low BC. It's not as aerodynamic. This is a very long, thin bullet. And so it's more aerodynamic. It doesn't meet the same kind of drag and resistance or wind deflection. And it's kind of like, on the 30 cals. If you're running a 110 grain, it's going to get blown away. Even at that higher velocity, it's going to bleed velocity. It's not as aerodynamic. But if you're running a 208, a 230, a 250, you're not going to have those same kind of problems because that high BC. So this is running heavy for caliber. So is the 30 caliber that I'm running, that 300 Win Mag. And so this is going to perform very well. Now let's just stop for a second and go through a bunch of examples from myself, from other members, etc., showing you the performance of smaller cartridges. Now that's pretty impressive. Now a couple to focus on. One was my doe from last year with this, 513 yards. It's a high shoulder shot. You can see it caused a lot of trauma. It destroyed the chest cavity. That hydraulic shock vaporized the chest cavity, did a really good job. Dropped dead on the spot. Another one is the 224 Valkyrie. Now, the reason I want to touch on this more is it's a prime example. You don't need a large cartridge to do this. This is at 465 yards. That's a nice hole. You know, you can cause a lot of trauma. It's with an 80 grain ELD match. Now, this is not a one and done. A lot of people think, oh, it's lucky, it only happens once. This is my buddy's daughter. She hunts with that 224 Valkyrie, and she kills a ton of deer. They live in western Tennessee. They can kill 3 does a day for the entire season. I mean, they just pile them. They'll literally drive a trailer and load all the deer on and drive them off between all of them. She's killed 3 over 700 yards with that 224 Valkyrie. She's never shot more than once, and she's never lost an animal. Now let's talk about moose. You saw my brother here. This is my older brother, Cole. This is his once-in-a-lifetime moose. Now, he started actually with the 243. The only reason he got rid of the 243 and went to the 260, which is a 6.5 millimeter, is there was a safety issue with the gun and it had to be returned. So he opted to go with a bolt-action 260 instead, which 260 takes the same bullet as a 6.5 Creedmoor or PRC. It's a good cartridge. A lot of people used to use it for competition, but he hunted his entire life from when we were kids hunting together until now with that 260. Hunting elk in Idaho, you know, ranges are generally between 200 to 500 yards where we were hunting. And he never lost an elk. He never shot more than once and never had a track job. And even his moose, his once-in-a-lifetime moose in Idaho that he drew, it was one shot. I think, if I remember right, it was around 300 yards, dropped it dead on the spot. And if you think that's something crazy, guess what? The most common moose round worldwide is the 6.5 by 55 Swede. And that's talking about places like Russia, etc., places in Canada. And guess what? That 6.5 by 55 is a 6.5 millimeter. It takes the exact same bullets as the 6.5 Creedmoor, as the 6.5 PRC, is the 260. And so you don't, there's mountains of evidence proving that you can do it. I mean, all of those that you just saw, I mean, they're not shot full of holes. It's all single shot engagements. I mean, there are occasional, and guys do this with magnums too. I've seen a guy maybe put another round in it just, you know, because they can, if it doesn't drop right away, if you do a behind the shoulder shot. But you don't really need it. In most of those cases, it's already dead. They just, because it's still standing there, hasn't gone down, they want to put another round in it if they're not doing a CNS shot. You really don't need anything big. And quite honestly, you're going to get better penetration. That's another thing people worry about. The smaller the diameter, the better you're going to penetrate. And so when you have an impact, the more surface area, the faster it's going to open up. That's why you're going to get a lot more meat trauma with something like a round nose. But when you're talking about small bullets like that, it's actually going to penetrate better because it's not meeting the same contact and it can slip in. That's how you defeat body armor. That's why the 5.7 was designed. It's a very small, thin bullet going really, really fast. In conclusion, I hope this has really helped you because honestly, you've seen examples from pictures, videos, everything from, you know, a 22 caliber, the 224 Valkyrie on big game, clear up to bison with a 243 and everywhere in between. I mean, these are prime examples. I mean, there's just so much evidence out there. It's mind-boggling to me of why people won't release that old thinking or that misinformation about you need a certain cartridge. Honestly, you're going to be better off going smaller. The reason being is you get these guides and stuff that are recommending these large cartridges. If a guy's already having trouble shooting, he doesn't have good fundamentals of marksmanship, adding recoil is not going to help. The more recoil, the harder it is to maintain those fundamentals of marksmanship and be good. And so by going larger, inducing flinching, and they're not going to shoot it as much, they're not going to practice, they're not going to perfect their form, it's actually counterproductive, and you're drastically increasing the probability of a bad shot versus going with something smaller that they can handle, they can practice, they can shoot comfortably, and picking the right bullet to give them the desired terminal ballistics. That is going to benefit them far more than anything. You know, a lot of people start their kids too high. I was one of those guys. I was a kid shooting a .338 Win Mag, and I wish I never had. It beat the living crap out of me. It developed a flinch. It took me years of training to get past that and get to where I am now. It really set me back, and I wish I had never gone down that road. Now, do I shoot magnums now? Yes, I shoot everything up to a 50 BMG. Difference is I'm an adult, I can handle it. I know my recoil sensitivity, I know what I can and can't do accurately, and I've had a lot of training, but you know, it took me years to get to that point just because of those bad fundamentals and flinching and all the problems I had from shooting a lightweight .338. So don't be afraid to go smaller. It's going to be more than enough. Even at long range, you can do, you know, everything you want to do. These animals are not armored. They're not, you know, these giants with giant bones that bullet's going to penetrate through. It's going to do a really good job. You know, if you're having problems, 99% of the time, as long as you're shooting well, it's the bullet. You're simply having a bad bullet and you're not getting good terminal ballistics. So changing the bullet, learning about bullets and understanding it, that's going to help you a lot. I'm going to put some links in the description below, not only to the videos that I showed you, but also to other videos of mine that can kind of help you understand about high shoulder shots, showing you actual differences between them, showing testing ballistics gel and stuff like that, actual hunting videos, etc., to kind of show you everything that goes into this and what you can do with these smaller cartridge and picking good bullets. So everybody, I hope this has been helpful to you. Be safe out there. Happy hunting.
Hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video, and happy hunting.